I was diagnosed way a long time ago. Uh, I was, our family doctor wanted me to go see our doctor, and I mean a neurologist, which I did. And after a brief diagnosis, he said, "I think you've got something like Michael J. Fox," which just floored me. And but anyway, we went from there, and I really didn't think much about it or have any results as a result of Parkinson's for several years.
Our neurologist has been hesitant to zero in on the dementia, even though she is watching it. She also did one of the quick cognitive assessments, which he struggled with. But so far, none of his doctors have committed to any formal dementia diagnosis, even though they acknowledge it's there.
We started with our primary doctor, and of course was diagnosed with having some form of that he was depressed. And I worked in the medical field, and depression was not what I was seeing. And I continued to stress that depression was not what I was seeing with him. And then we had tests done, we had spinal taps. There were so many different tests that were painful for him that at a point I said, that's enough. We've done enough. We need to find someone that can look a little further because it's not depression. And that led us to being able to see someone that dealt with neurology and to have a full whole day with a psychoneurologist to help pinpoint really what was going on with us. That took about a year, and probably would have taken longer if I had not been so persistent that we're not doing any other tests other than, to find out what is really going on with his brain, because I felt there was something else with his brain and it wasn't the fact that he was depressed.
Well, the first steps, of course, like everybody else, midlife crisis. We got to go to a marriage counselor. Sharon could see that I was trying. And that was the first thing that we actually tried until Sharon saw a video and she realized that I was having the same symptoms that my mother had, who passed away of Pick's disease, is what they used to call FTD.
Yeah, but when I saw It Is What It Is that the AFTD produced quite by accident, that's when I really put it together that, oh my goodness, Rod has what his mother had, because we were never informed of her having any behavioral issues until after Rod was diagnosed. And so I wasn't looking for that. They always said, oh, it's like Alzheimer's, and I didn't see any of that. So I just had no idea.
They say it takes 4 years to get a correct diagnosis, or up to 4 years. And so she decided that we were not going to start with my regular PCP at that time. We were going to go direct to Emory Healthcare. That's where then she called and they gave her an appointment 6 to 8 months out. And that just wasn't going to work, but that's all she could do until we went away for Thanksgiving. And when we came back, she was on the phone because I'd had a tremendous meltdown.
It was when I called and they said 7 months, I was like, oh. So when we got back from this big incident over Thanksgiving, I called and said, he's going to lose his, because he was still working. I said, he's going to lose his job. I don't know what to do. Please refer us to someone that has knowledge of FTD so we can perhaps get a diagnosis, because that's what I think it is, because that's what his mother had. part of it is that because Rod's mother had Pick's disease, which is now behavioral variant FTD, because she had that, Rod has always had an awareness after he was diagnosed that he has FTD. That can be very different for a majority of people. Most people have a nosognosia. That means that they have no idea anything is wrong with them, which is why it's so hard to get a diagnosis, because they just say, there's nothing wrong with me, it's you. So we were fortunate in that when I said, Rod, I think you have what your mother had, he was willing to go for the testing and he was willing to get the diagnosis and he understood what it meant. So his actions were not as extreme as some people. If someone is not who they were, you should always think neurological before you consider psychological, because people don't change overnight. And it was such a drastic change in his personality that it was hard to understand what was going on. So no one understands that when someone is that different, they should eliminate a neurological disorder before they go the counseling route. And so that, I think, would save a lot of people a lot of time. It is always a clinical diagnosis because there are no biomarkers for FTD. So it's always clinical, and that's why it's so important to go to someone that knows FTD, because so many people are misdiagnosed many, many times before they get an actual diagnosis, which is why it takes about 4 years to figure it out.
My family brought it to my attention, and then over time, we went to the doctor, and then they started testing me, and it took about 6 months before I got a complete diagnosis that I truly had Lewy body dementia.
It did take a while for us to convince him to go to the doctor, because I think no one wants to really admit that there's something wrong. But I think I was serious. I was going to leave him. And I think he said, no, I will go to the doctor. So we found a fabulous neurologist, and it did take 6 months of a lot of extensive testing, primarily ruling out things. Since he had the heart attack, you rule out, was it something carotid, that sort of thing, even Lyme's disease. So it took a while.
I think the first was talking to my doctor, my PCP. He was absolutely wonderful. Adored him and really liked him a lot. He helped me through a lot of hard times. But when I tried to tell him about some strange things that was happening, he just kind of said, everybody does that. And he didn't listen to me. I mean, he was not ignoring me. He's a wonderful, wonderful doctor. But I just couldn't see what, I don't know, it just didn't make a lot of sense sometimes.
It was probably a couple more times, maybe the next time, that he gave the simple testing of holding up the pen and what is pinpoint and so forth, and asking, or naming 3 things and asking her to recall those. But even that might have been the second or third time, until finally he did refer her to a neurologist. So it took some time. It was probably a year, maybe even a year and a half.
I would think more like that.
Yeah.